all of the above. It all works, right? And some of that is going to come down to some contractors only want to work with high-end residential renovation. They're not going to touch anything under maybe 100K. That doesn't make sense for them to work with investors, for instance. They don't want our 30K residential projects. And then the other three are going to be within a range of each other. And one guy might give you a bid that says, Jose, it's going to cost you $50,000 to do this rehab, and they just give you a lump sum. I'll do everything for 50K. So for me as a rehabber, that doesn't fit very well because I don't know.
Hi everybody, Jose Luis Morales. Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. Today we have the one and only Tracy Royce from Flip School. She's the founder. And today she's going to be going over with us how to choose the right contractor for your real estate project. And then once you choose the right contractor, how do you make sure that you're getting the right cost for the remodel of the property? In other words, how much does it cost to actually remodel a house? We're going to be going over different rules of thumbs for maybe flooring, techniques for dealing with the contractor, roof, plumbing, electrical, just different things. So welcome to the show, Tracy. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same here. I'm excited about this interview because I think that this interview has the capability to be really helpful for people. I feel like this is whether you're a homeowner looking to remodel your house, whether you're somebody looking to remodel your rentals, looking to flip properties. I think this is a key piece of the puzzle if you're anywhere involved in real estate.
Just like you said, construction really touches almost every part of this business, no matter how hands-on or hands-off you are. And I will say, and maybe you see this on your side, on the retail side, that people that want to get into investing are intimidated not only by contractors, but by pricing and by price gouging or not having a basic understanding of what do things cost and how do I get through this project without, getting taken advantage of or losing control of the project management. So I'm certainly happy to dive into that a little bit today because it is a bottleneck, I think, for most people getting into real estate investing or staying on the sidelines and being afraid to take the next best step.
Not only that, Tracy, but sometimes when I'm helping people, I'm like, oh, how much did you spend on the kitchen? And then they tell me the price. I'm like just looking at them like, oh my God, like this is probably half the cost you could probably get it for. So I think that this is important. So for our viewers who don't know who Tracy Royce is, who is Tracy Royce, and then how did you get involved in real estate flipping, real estate education, real estate holding? How did you get involved in the industry?
I got into the industry almost by default. I had a previous landlord reach out that, unbeknownst to me at the time, he had a couple dozen rentals and he worked full time for the municipality. He knew me, he trusted me, he knew I worked on the finance side as a loan officer. And this was back, Jose, when you could fog a mirror and get a loan. And I never felt comfortable really doing that. So when he offered me that opportunity, I jumped at it. And that led to me working for other investors as the market was crashing. And I got, I think, a really coveted education. Paid internship is really how I like to think about it because it taught me not only creative acquisition, tactical disposition when the world was falling apart. I don't know if you were around during that time, but it was pretty hairy. And then finally emerged after, too long of being behind the scenes to say, if I can do my small part to help make these guys millionaires, maybe I should put half that effort into doing the same thing for myself. So that evolved into, I did have my license at the time. I did a ton of short sales working with people in distress, starting to use those funds to buy fix and flips and then use the funds from that to be able to buy rentals. And so I've been able to create financial freedom for myself by just following really strategic and intentional, having a financial direction with my funds. And any of your viewers can do the same things. But again, it takes some time, like you had said, little bit by little bit. And then also just having a vision for what it is that you're trying to do with your career and not just working for a living, like that's your whole life, but saying, how does this business serve me for how I'd like to live my life? So that's where I'm at now. And I do, I always have projects going on. And I also do coaching and teaching now, like you had mentioned, with Flip School and with Arizona Real Estate Investors Association.
love it. I love it. So let's get right into the topic. Like, let's say somebody is going to flip a property, or somebody owns a rental and they're going to remodel the rental, or somebody's going to remodel their primary residence. What's the first thing in choosing the right contractor? Like, what are some tips there?
So, if we're talking about homeowners, which is retail versus investors, you're probably going to pick a little bit of a different avatar when it comes to your contractor. If I'm a homeowner, and I'll just make the assumption that I've maybe done something resembling some updating in my life to a former residence, but this is my full blown rehab, I might want to just hire someone that's going to walk me through the entire process, knowing that I'm paying a premium for that, but then also trying to understand, if I am paying a premium, what exactly does that look like? So cost plus method is what's typical, meaning what is the cost of materials, and then your GC is adding 10 to 25% on top of that. So it adds a certain level of transparency to, hey, my budget is X, and then for your services and your expertise and your project management, I'm going to pay a premium for that, which is again that ratio that we talked about. If I'm an investor, that method is still applies, but I'm probably not going to be paying the same prices. I don't want to just trust that they know we're the best place to get materials, because they might be incentivized to go pick out more expensive flooring and more expensive counters. They're busy. They might just know a guy that comes in, and you're not having as much cost control. If you try to do that with your residential GC that's helping you remodel your home, they might say, listen, you need to go pick out this stuff yourself, because if you're going to be this involved and try to nickel and dime along the way, we're probably not a good fit. So that's all to say, the expectation between using a general contractor on a retail application versus an investor application might look a little bit different in their expectation of your involvement and oversight on more minute cost control. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it. And then if we were looking for an actual contractor, would it be best to look online? Would it be best to kind of drive around your neighborhood, like see if there's any active projects, walk into the project? Would it be best to call real estate agents, the top producing agents, ask them for referrals to see who they use? What's like a way, like let's just imagine that I relocated here from Arizona and I don't know anybody.
Yeah, yeah. All of the above. It all works, right? And some of that is going to come down to, some contractors only want to work with high-end residential renovation. They're not going to touch anything under maybe 100K. That doesn't make sense for them to work with investors, for instance. They don't want our 30K, residential, small residential projects. In the same vein, um, it's important to find someone that you can mesh with as far as communication style. So, to answer your question directly, there's a lot of ways. Referrals are always great because you have some sort of soft insight on someone else's experience with that person. If you can visit one of their job sites, so be it. If you can talk to past customers, some guys are a little bit weird about that, some aren't. They are perfectly happy for you to come over and take a look at some of their other jobs. But most of the people that have been around that are established at least have examples of what a typical project for them is. So if I'm looking to do a 30K rehab, I'm not calling the luxury guy that my friend referred that works in luxury retail, right? I'm calling the person from the RIA that someone had recommended that they use on all their flips or rentals. And that could be a good introduction. Even Home Depot has a link to contractors that you can, if you're brand new, got dropped off here from planet Mars and knew no other human on the planet and had to start somewhere, that's at least one avenue for you. Angie, even some guys advertise on Craigslist. There's a lot of different avenues, but when you're looking for a contractor that fits, I always like to say, call 5 people. One of them is never going to call you back because they got too busy or for whatever reason. It's just normal. They're just not going to call you back. One's going to be way too high. They're just not going to be a good match, probably because of pricing. And that's fair. They either maybe don't work in your area of the valley, like here. Phoenix Metro is a really big metro center. So there's some guys that just want to stay in the West Valley or the East Valley. And so it doesn't really make sense for them to take on your project in the other side of the earth, as it were. And then the other three are going to be within a range of each other. And one guy might give you a bid that says, Jose, it's going to cost you $50,000 to do this rehab, and they just give you a lump sum. I'll do everything for 50K. So for me as a rehabber, that doesn't fit very well because I don't know exactly what's going into the cost, and maybe we can work together collectively so I can help lower the cost if that's outside of my budget. Maybe one of them might give you an itemized bid, and then the other one maybe or may not be a good fit because of something else. Maybe they just had a couple bad reviews on Yelp that just didn't give you the feel goods. So when you call five, one's never going to call you back, one's going to be too high, and then the other three you get a price range. And from there, I would start getting bids and then also getting the qualitative part of the relationship, which is, does this person communicate? Because what's going to happen during your renovation? Is everything going to be on time and go perfectly and stay on schedule? Never.
Yeah.
Right? So how are we as adults going to figure this out? Typically it's head on, hey, let's pick up the phone, communicate, go through whatever the challenge is. So I want to get a really good impression that this person communicates really well and that we can address any hiccups together. I also want to know, I don't need the cheapest guys, but I want fair pricing. Okay, does it seem like we're fair with each other? And part of that, the asterisk I'll put with fair is, let's say your bid comes in at 50K, my budget's 45. Is there somewhere I'll ask them, hey, Jose, this is still around my budget. Can we go through this because maybe I can do some of the material sourcing? I don't necessarily want to cut your labor costs. I know you guys work really hard. Is there a way that we can try to collaborate? I'd love to give you this job, and see if there's some other way that we can try to lessen the price in an area where I can help out. And that will give you an idea too, especially as working with an investor. I don't want to nickel and dime people. That doesn't set a good precedence, but I expect fairness and they expect fairness from me. So that's a good way to tell, is this a good contractor for me? And then lastly, are they respectful? Do they show up on time? If they're going to be late, do they tell you that they're going to be late? Do they do things when they say they're going to do things? We're all busy. Some guys are more organized than others, but I want an overall good impression that if we're going to work together for the next 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is, that this is going to be a good working professional relationship. So in as much as it's quantitative with, hey, is their pricing work out? Do they have a bunch of good reviews? Does the timeline work? Qualitatively, I also want to know, does this seem like this is going to be a good fit? So those handful of things should tell you, does this feel like we can move forward together? The opposite side of that would be, do they seem disrespectful? Do they not call you when they say they're going to call? Do they make a bunch of excuses? Has their uncle died for the 3rd time this month and that's why they can't show up? Do they expect half their money up front and then don't give you any timeline or don't do what they say they're going to do? So in as much as there's red flags that people love to highlight, because bad news always seems to spread faster, I always like to point to, well, when you know you have a good one, how do you really know? And so that's why I try to highlight that first, and that should really help guide your listeners to, this is a good one. Let's move forward with this guy or these guys.
I love it. And then I think also what you said is, do you ever look people up online? Like whenever, like searching for contractor to see if you find anything, to see, do you ever recommend that they look them up on like a state website to see if they have any like violations or any complaints or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's no reason not to. And if you go on the ROC, your registrar of contractors, you can get some great information there. Sometimes they're working under a buddy's license, and if they don't disclose that, then that could land you in some hot water. So that I would want to know as well. And anything that might have come up from a previous Yelp review or a Google review. I mean, listen, if someone's been around for 20 years and they have a couple bad reviews floating around from homeowners, it doesn't matter what business you're in, that's expected. But I want to see a pattern of, this is what I'm going to expect as well. So even if they're really cheap, which is enticing, hey, I'll paint for, 70 cents a square foot, paint included, it's giving me pause. And so of course I want to look them up online to say, well, what's the catch here?
Got it. Okay, cool. And then any tips on contracts? Like you mentioned briefly, like if they want 50% of the money up front, like that could be a red flag. Like how would you recommend, like let's say that I find somebody that I feel comfortable with and they want 50%. What would be a better way to spread out payments?
So where I'm at now, I pay for materials. So there's absolutely no reason why any of my guys, and I hire out all my subcontractors. So there's no reason why any of them would need 50% because I either have an account at the supply house or I'm paying for it when they get there with my business accounts, right? So 50% doesn't even make sense. So it's not even a conversation at that point. So that helps me cost control. For someone that's newer, I do like to tease out some of the trades. For instance, if you're using a more retail roofing company and they're going to have a roof done in a few days and they're ordering all that product for you, it might just be standard policy that you can't come in and strong arm them as a smaller investor to say, well, Tracy said never to give a contractor 50% upfront. Well, there are some instances, so I always want to say not in every single trade and situation are you going to be able to argue this. But for the most part, if you have an understanding of, hey, if I'm paying for the materials here, you can either look at it like every week I'm going to pay you for the work that's been done, or we're going to have certain draw schedules based on if your work is going to take 6 weeks. Hey, here's waypoint 1, here's waypoint 2, and then saving a healthy enough amount after the end, once they're all done. So that way it's like if you're only leaving $100, what's their incentive to really, come back and finish up on time because they're on to the next where someone's giving them a big draw to start a new job. So leaving a healthy amount ish enough such that they're still incentivized to get the job done enough on time that it's like, hey, we need to get the rest of our money. So I like to break it up, and that depends on the trade, that depends on the job, and it depends on the timeline.
Got it. Okay. So breaking it down basically helps out tremendously on that.
Yes, and absolutely everything needs to be in writing. Even if it is just a simple text, if you have a change to anything, to say, hey, I'm going to forget this, so I'm just going to text you real quick. We changed the grout color, I'm texting you this. So I have everything in writing. And especially when it comes to money, Jose, that's something I don't mess around with. If you want to be taken seriously as an investor, contractors and trades are already on edge with most investors because they tend to be the bunch that wants everything done for less than cost. They're pushing their timelines. They're stressed out. If they don't know how to underwrite a deal, now they're taking it out on you because you're the guy in front of them that's doing the work. And they're trying to, typically talk you down on what you're costing because they didn't know enough about the cost going into it. So when it comes to paying people, I want to be very clear when we work together. Hey, this is when you're going to get paid. This is how you're going to get paid. And this is exactly when we know what deems this is when the next payment is coming. So there's no question of like, hey, are we going to get paid today or not? Yes, if we've done XYZ by Wednesday, this is done by Thursday, you're getting a Zelle from me at Friday before noon. So I'm strict about that. And so my guys know, hey, if we continue to work with Tracy, our expectations are there. We want to make sure that we're getting stuff done on time and also moving forward with things because we all are on the clear and same page of how is this going to play out for me getting paid.
Yeah, it's good because earlier you mentioned something as well too about breaking down the estimate, and I started doing this a long time ago. Like if I would get an estimate for 50,000, like how much is materials, how much is cost, like how much is the flooring, how much is the kitchen, how much is this, and then you're able to like see if it's a lot more reasonable when you break it down. If you just get a lump sum, even then they could be using $1 flooring and charging a bunch on labor versus using a good quality material. So I think that's a good rule of thumb. Let's get into some of the repairs as well too. Like let's say somebody wanted to install flooring on their property. Like how much does flooring typically cost, and what's approximate flooring cost as well too? Or not
Yeah,
flooring,
so
labor cost to install, like let's say laminate.
yeah, and that's an open-ended question. Your labor costs might be different because you're in California. You might have stricter labor laws than we do out here. Do you want a licensed contractor? Are you open to having someone that's not licensed to do your flooring? So there's a variance. as there's a variance with almost every line item with any remodel,
Mhm.
right? That said, if you have 2 or 3 flooring go-tos that you have, and I'm using Home Depot because they're nationwide, I'm not saying necessarily go there or don't go there, I'm just using them because everyone knows them. If you have 2 or 3 products there that you know cost, $2 to $4 a square foot, that like if you talked about LVP or laminate or what did you said vinyl, I believe,
Yeah.
that are a good product that go with the rest of your materials, then you can say, hey, I have this product. What would you cost, or what does your labor cost just for this? So tile, the conversation would be, what sort of layer are we doing? Is it a large format? Who's supplying the materials? Am I paying for this? Are you paying for that? So when it comes to something that's a little bit easier to install like that, you could be looking at a couple bucks a square foot. Yours might be more than that. The install goes a lot quicker, but it might be just as much as the actual material cost. But then you're also talking about timeline and getting it done a lot faster. So all of this will depend, but I think the more important highlight is having an understanding of, hey, if I'm buying this through Home Depot and it costs me $3 per square foot, then I can go to the subs and get 3 different bids if I'm brand new to say, hey, this is the product. We need to have the prep, the underlayment, and then the installation. What do you charge for that exactly? I'm paying for materials. So that way you are an educated investor saying, person one said $2 a square foot, the next guy said 3, the next guy said 4. What is included, or what is the difference between those 3 people? Or they're all great and I can use any of them at any time. Guy A is going to be busy. I'm going to call guy 2 and guy 3, but now I have a range of what my labor costs are. I know what my flooring cost is, but now here's my labor cost. So that applies to anything in your renovation, whether it's, cabinetry, flooring, almost anything. So you should never just have one person that does it. You should always be looking for good trades and have 2 or 3. Even if they're all fantastic, they get busy, or they're going to only work in certain areas of town, or maybe they don't want to take on a certain project that you have, but they're great for the next one.
Does it cost more to install tile than like laminate, or is laminate more expensive than tile?
Well, it depends on the tile that you're using, right? You can get stuff for less than $1 a square foot. You can get wood look tile for, 8, 9, $10. It depends. Laminate
For
typically
labor.
is, yeah, it depends. So I have really inexpensive tile, guys. Laminate is also inexpensive. It just goes a lot faster. Your cuts are super simple. You're typically saving on the timeline as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. I'm always looking at what are people putting in the neighborhood. And if I need to put tile, I'll put tile. If it's mostly LVP or, some other type engineered product, then I'll look to that as well.
The reason I asked that is I had a client who went to Home Depot, bought some tile on sale, but he didn't realize how much more expensive it was to put the tile than the
Yeah,
laminate, just because of the time consumption and the prep work that it takes underneath there. And it actually, he got a good deal on the tile, but once he factored it all in, it was just a lot more expensive than had he just installed like laminate or something else on the property.
right.
What about like if somebody needs to replace a roof? Like any tips there? Like what would something like that cost on a roof? Or I know obviously it varies, and I think this is one of the problems with roofs that sometimes they'll give you like an estimate, but then they'll say once we uncover it, that can change as well too. Like they'll say, okay, like it's X amount, but once we take it apart, if there's more wood that is rotten, then at that point, the estimate could go up substantially. Like any tips to be able to protect yourself there?
Yeah, that is going to be almost any aspect of the rehab. And when I'm underwriting deals, there's always an oops factor, whether that's none of us saw something doing our initial walkthrough, or none of us could see something because it's not something we could have discovered until the walls were open up. So a good example for that would be your electrical package. If I'm thinking I'm going to spend 6K to rewire a house, and all of a sudden we open it up and there's, a hamster's nest of electric going on in there that the homeowner deemed themselves an electrician, and it's like, now we're having to undo that. Now that takes, a whole other now you're having to add in a lot more. So there's always an oops factor, which is typically around 10% of your overall budget that you're going to factor in. Like, hey, if there's more, like you said, wood, rot that no one could have known until we had it exposed, or electrical, or whatever it is, you always have to have an oops factor, which right now, especially the way that, I don't know exactly how your submarket is doing in Phoenix, we are super undersupplied with inventory. And how that typically works is if you bring a good product to market, it doesn't have to be, there was a point where we had a blip where it was a buyer's market, that was half a second. But buyers were a lot more particular. Whereas when there's very little inventory and you as the seller have something that is well done, presentable, and priced well, it moves pretty quickly, right? So it gives you some sort of forgiveness on like how much do we really need to do here. So that being said, if it looks like your systems need to be changed, I'm factoring in a bigger oops factor, and I'm also factoring in a bigger margin. Because even if we're in a tight inventory environment, that's not to say that the buyer is still not going to expect a credit, because now they either have to do it or you have to replace the AC, get the roof done. I'm sure you can see from the retail side, most buyers are not super, super flush with cash. And so they want that sort of stuff done. So if you think that you're going to have something bigger, the advice, getting back to your direct question, is call 3 or 4 roofing companies and have them come out. So you are not only getting educated on price per square foot, is it pitched, is it not pitched, or will they even allow repairs, or do they require you to get a whole new roof? What's the warranty? Is that transferable? Again, you as an investor are educated on, okay, what are my options here? What's going to be my highest ROI, and what makes me feel good and sleep at night knowing I'm delivering a good product that's well done to the end buyer as well.
I love it.
I think that sort of answers your question.
It does. Any tips for bathrooms or even the kitchen?
As far as just budgeting, or
what would it cost to like remodel? I know I'm kind of like, it varies by area. Let's just say in your area in Phoenix, what would it cost for you to do a bathroom?
I mean, if I'm talking about a smaller bathroom, I mean, it can be a few $1,000s. It just, again, depends. But if you are educated on your material costs, and depending on the price point, one thing that I really like about rehabbing is you don't always have to use high-end designer expensive materials to get the look. So us girls know, they're called dupes, like a duplicate. So like, let's say your wife or girlfriend uses a really expensive foundation. For you guys, that's the base makeup that us ladies use. And it's normally $65, but another brand just came out with the exact same thing for $20. What do you think we're going to use? It looks exactly the same and it delivers the same thing. We're just getting the look for less. So it's no different than putting an outfit together that looks like it's from Chanel and it's, a different name brand. And it's no different when you're rehabbing houses. You can still get the look for less with thoughtful material sourcing. So you can keep your cost down low by, I'm not buying restoration hardware fixtures, right? But I can go on Amazon and get a very similar looking chandelier or fixture for a very small fraction of the price. So that's one of the ways that you can lower your cost and then start to understand, okay, what is this bathroom going to cost me if I'm down to the studs, or if I'm just redoing the surrounds, updating the valves, raising the lights a little bit, doing the, updating the electrical, the important stuff, but I'm not going crazy with super high-end cabinetry or countertops. I'm finding ways to save on cost, but also get a really designer look for less. The dupe. Yep.
Awesome. I love that tip. What about a kitchen? Like if like a traditional kitchen for like a 1,200 square foot house, like is 50,000 too much for something like that?
So on the investor side, one of the things is, since we're talking about like room by room, let's just talk about overall. If I'm an investor and a wholesaler sends out a deal and they're like, hey, we're having an open house today from 2 to 4. I'm coming out. I'm not going to have time to do, unless you have your GC on call or your GC is your partner or whatever. I need to be able to know roughly how much this is going to cost me. So there's a couple different ways. The retail value of the house is one number that you can work backwards from. So
Yeah.
me as an investor, you as an investor, we're looking to spend between 10 to 15% of the retail value of the house on our rehab. Okay. So that's between the kitchen, bathrooms, roofing systems, everything else. The 15% would be upwards of, we're doing a little bit more than cosmetic here. We're looking at the systems. If you want to look at price per square foot, that's another way. So, if you're able to material source really thoughtfully, you have labor costs down, you might still be able to get away with 20 bucks a square foot. Some of you might have just fallen out of your seat and said that's impossible. Others of you that listen that are maybe in the rural South are like 20 bucks a square foot, I can get it done for 12. Perfect. Send your guys out here. But that range at least says, hey, this is a newer house. I don't need to redo the systems. I can get away with a cosmetic update. That's all this needs, and that's all the neighborhood is telling me that I need to get my full market value. So I can look at a cost per square foot rough estimate. I can look at a percentage of the retail, kind of see where those marry a little bit or cross. And that can give you a rough estimate of what you're going to expect as a rehabber.
I just did the fit like 10 to 15%. We just rehabbed the property that I think we bought at like 507. We sold it at 775.
Okay.
But 15% was somewhat in the range of where we were at on a renovation as well too. So I even like
Yeah.
that, looking at it from a percentage perspective, because sometimes, like, even as investors, people have to go into a property and make a decision really fast. And
Really
if you
fast.
can't make a decision really fast, then the next guy who's maybe a little bit more experienced might get it. And then at that point, you missed out on that opportunity because that other guy's more certain on the construction aspect of it as well too.
Right. Right. Yeah. And even when wholesalers say, hey, it only needs this, I understand that they're trying to give the feedback to investors to say, hey, based on our knowledge, this is what we think that it would require. But for any of you that are brand new, it is your ultimate responsibility to be able to have enough of an understanding to say, no, in fact, this is a mid-century house. I can't just redo the cosmetic parts of it. We'll probably have knob and tube wiring. We, probably are talking about very outdated systems. I'm not going to get that retail value unless I dig into the elements of this house. And that's going to cost me way above and beyond what you think that this is, the paint and carpet. So having these two ways to say, hey, either price per square foot or percentage of the house, do I have those numbers that kind of have a blended rate, if you will, to give me some sort of guesstimate of what this will cost. I mean, I would still always recommend doing a walkthrough and also looking at your comps. I don't want to just throw numbers out there. Um, but if you have 15 minutes to walk a property and you have to use your best guesstimate, that's the quick and dirty way to approach it.
What would you say are some of the most expensive, like, surprises that you see in rehabbing properties, or
Yeah, it
things
ends
that,
up,
yeah, and things
no,
that
please.
investors don't take into account sometimes?
It ends up being normally the stuff that either they didn't think of when they were doing the walkthrough because they were like I like to call it the John Wayne method. So they walk through property and they're pointing, oh, that needs to be done, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. And so then they walk out with a pen and a pad of a list of things that need to be done. We're all excited, emotions are running high, we got our lenders lined up, we finally got a signed contract. And then your project starts and you're like, crap, there's all this stuff that comes up at almost every single juncture that I'm like, well, I didn't think of that. Why didn't, I didn't think that we had to think about that, or I didn't take that into account. And it comes down to every single last decision, your hinges, your hardware, your framing, if you're
Mhm.
removing walls for an open concept. And people get emotional about the purchase side, not practical and logical of calming their nerves through spreadsheets to say, I love this house. I would rehab it in a heartbeat, but the numbers just do not make sense. So it really comes back down to, if there's something I don't know, a really good example would be, hey, a wholesaler or however the house came to me, do you know the age of the AC? I don't. Do you know if it works? I don't know that either. I have to think that it doesn't work. If I can do a walkthrough and prove otherwise, and I can see the T stat, I can maybe have either myself or one of my guys go look at the sticker to see if they can pull a serial number and know the date, fantastic. But if I can't access those things, I have to just pretend that it needs a brand new AC. I've probably lost deals that way, but I'm also not going to be the one left holding the bag because I'm just hoping for the best. I don't make money on hope. I make money when the numbers show me that this is a deal.
I love it. Do you ever run into like in Arizona like foundation issues at all ever? Um,
Yeah,
that
it's not as common. Like, do you guys have it a lot where you're at?
so had I not been a real estate agent before I became an investor, I think I would have probably got burned a couple of times. But because I was a real estate agent and I saw properties with foundations and people taught me what to look for them. That was one of those things that I knew how to account for those things. But that can get really expensive in our area. That can get anywhere from 30, 40, 50, $60,000 just depending on the property. But that could be one of the things that maybe the house looks okay, but if you didn't factor that in, that can potentially take away a lot of the profit on a deal.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, kind of like you had asked with the roofing. You would want to get several and different opinions and bids on that to
Mhm.
present to the seller at that point to say, hey, either way that you slice this, I'm still taking on the risk for this, and it's going to cost me at least 20K, probably 30 or 40. I don't necessarily expect a dollar for dollar credit. Maybe you do, but at least that way you're presenting them hard, cold facts that, like, you have to deal with this or I have to deal with this. So if you want me to liquefy your asset and for me to take on this risk, I need a steeper discount. So yes, you're right to say it's a good negotiating tactic if you're ready to actually take on that problem. Here in Arizona, it happens. I mean, there's certain things that it's like, is it the end of the world or is this just normal settling? That's what you have to be educated enough to understand, because the number one reason why sellers get sued here in Arizona is disclosure and material facts. If I know that there's major foundation issues and I'm slapping some laminate over it and
Mhm.
praying to Jesus no one ever finds out, and they do, that could be a really big issue, right? So you as an investor, I would spend some time if there is something that concerns you, like the doors aren't shutting correctly, the windows aren't shutting correctly, there's really bad stem wall issues, there's stair stepping along, several areas of the house, things are becoming less functional because of the settling, then yeah, you really need to be careful with thinking whatever someone told you, oh, this is, 10 grand. Well, it may be, it may not be, but that's when you call in the experts to say, I'm not a foundation expert, so let's call a few in and see what they have to say about this.
Are there things that a homeowner could do to kind of like bring down some of the estimates? Like, let's say that you're planning on remodeling a kitchen. Like, if sometimes the homeowner maybe gut the kitchen, could they maybe negotiate a better price? Or what are some things that maybe a homeowner can do if they wanted to save some money on the construction aspect of it?
I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is the DIY, but if you don't want to build cabinets and put in a backsplash and rewire your kitchen, don't. It's like I walked into people's houses where they're like, "Oh, we've remodeled." I'm like, "Oh, you could tell." um, I would say be decisive. One of the things that ends up really blowing your budget is when you're like, this is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden you see a new Pinterest board or an Instagram post, or someone gets in your ear about, we really do need that, upgraded appliance package, or I really do want to add this after the fact. So those are called change orders.
Mhm.
They're not the end of the world because sometimes things happen. Again, like you had said earlier, we couldn't have predicted. Now that we have the framing exposed, what we thought would be possible is going to be a little bit more difficult. But being decisive up front and then also understanding your material costs. Hey, if I go to a high end cabinetry source, they're going to be more expensive. Could I live with a get the look from IKEA, right? If I understand the basic structure of what the boxes are made out of, the durability, the warrantability, these sort of things, would I be open to going direct to a cabinet source and maybe material sourcing those and giving those to the installer? If you have a GC or project manager, saying, hey, if I supply the cabinets, can I just pay for the install for these instead of the materials plus? But oftentimes too, if you're working with a general contractor, they're going to have industry discounts that you as a homeowner do not. But I would say the number one thing is just being decisive. It really comes down to timeline and change orders that can be frustrating and costly.
Got it. Do any of your students ever, instead of putting in brand new kitchen cabinets, just paint the kitchen cabinets? And then how do you make that determination as to which is best to do? And then on top of that, like for bathrooms, do they ever reglaze them instead of remodeling the entire tub and putting in a brand new um, bathroom?
Yeah, yeah. So we have a joke in flip school. We don't say paint the cabinets, we say refinish
Yeah.
because it sounds like, you're letting your kid take a paintbrush and like paint the cabinets, and people already have, thoughts on flippers. Like, we don't do anything, we don't add any value, and we make these, ginormous paychecks and drink Mai Tais on the beach. Um, so yes, there are certainly instances, especially if your boxes are still good and the cabinetry is similar in style enough to where you look around the neighborhood to say, what would a buyer expect here? Now, if your house was built in 1970, but everything around it has been updated, I'm not going to refinish the cabinets, right? I'm going to freshen it up either by putting new faces, or I'm just going to do the kitchen. But to answer your question, um, refinishing cabinets has actually been more on trend because if you do the preparation work correctly, it can look almost like brand new cabinets for a fraction of the cost. So it is a smart way to approach it if you get enough evidence looking around that, yes, I can still get a high ROI for doing this. The buyers, I'm seeing this in other rehabs in the neighborhood. I can do it very tastefully. I can install new hardware and it's going to look amazing.
Mhm.
So there are times with between that and the bathrooms where it's like, why would I rip all this out when there's really no evidence to show me that that's what buyers expect? And that comes down to price point, that comes down to other renovations that you're seeing in the neighborhood, like what's normal for the area, what's normal for this. Again, we're taking the emotion out of it to say, this is my first rehab. I'm so excited. I want to put all this tile in that I've been seeing, and I'm so, over the moon to just take out my Pinterest ideas. That's something to do on your own home. When we're talking about investment properties, we're always comparing to what the numbers and the other rehabs in the neighborhood are saying. What do buyers expect? What can I do to deliver a good product? And what's going to get me the highest ROI?
I love it. Anything else that you think would add value to people as it relates to selecting the right contractor, or it relates to helping you negotiate prices, or even um, just a remodel in general?
My best experience has come from when I communicate with the guys exactly what it is that I want. Here's my vision. Here's the materials that we're going to use. Here's my timeline. Here's my budget. Collaborate with them on things that it's like, hey, now that we have the walls opened up, we might need to change a couple things. And then also, I have found when people are really good when people are really good at what they do, they love to talk about it, right? I don't come from a construction background. So, in many instances, I have had to rely on YouTube University and my trades to get up to speed on understanding what questions to ask,
Mhm.
right? So, if I'm always looking for the cheapest guy and I'm pushing him to get stuff done because I didn't know the numbers and I'm stressed out and he doesn't like me and I don't, I'm stressed out about money, that is not a good working relationship. Now, when I have a guy that I'm paying fairly that knows what the heck that he's been doing, that's been doing this for a couple generations, and I can say, hey, why are you doing it this way? I've seen it done the other way. Oh, well, we do it because XYZ. That's going to be very common for different trades. The last tile guy is going to say that this guy's tile was crap, and like this trade didn't do it right, and I would do it so much better. So I like to look for people that I can learn from and collaborate with. And, I've been doing this long enough that we all collaborate with, each other at this point, that they're asking me things. But overall, I want to see like, I don't want to nickel and dime people. I want to pay fairly. I want them to have clear expectations with me. They know what they're getting when they're working with me. And on some things, yes, we will need to budget more tightly. And then in other instances, I want them to feel good. Like, she pays fairly, she pays on time. Every project is not going to be a struggle to the lowest dime here. And in fact, sometimes I'll bonus my guys to say, hey, you went above and beyond. Yeah, we were a couple days over schedule, but you guys did XYZ. I didn't expect you to, and you did it. Thank you so much. See you on the next one. That goes a really long way. And just being grateful. And I cannot stress how important it is to communicate very, very, very clearly. When you're talking about millimeters, inches, minutia, there's almost not such a thing as over communicating. And like, for instance, when it comes to surrounds, as an example, for your bathrooms, putting your tile lay schemas up on the wall. This is the tile we're using. We're doing this lay. We're using this grout. We want this color schluter. We want da 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 da. Make it simple for your guys. So in as much as like, hey, looking for a good contractor, people get so intimidated and afraid because they've heard the horror stories, Jose, where I think if you really examine what got them there in the first place, and I'm not blaming the victim, as it were. Of course, there's instances where, contractors go sideways. But if you look at it, a lot of times it comes down to, are you communicating with their clear expectations? Are you doing a bunch of change orders? Are they getting paid fairly? Are you, bringing them rock stars and lunch on the days that they're really kicking butt? So it goes both ways. In as much as you want to find really good contractors, those contractors want to find really good investors and homeowners to work with. More so investors. Homeowners don't remodel that much, as much as we do, but looking at it both ways. So if I find a guy that checks all those boxes for me that I talked about earlier, it's not about the lowest price. It's, is this a good working relationship moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And then how can Flip School help somebody looking to maybe get into the real estate game?
Yeah, so a lot of people are really intimidated at the construction aspect and the project management costs, like we've been talking about, throughout this entire conversation. So Flip School is a data and brain dump of everything that I've done for myself, having no background in construction, into a step-by-step course that anywhere in the country that you're at, if you go from lesson 1 to lesson 8, in 8 weeks, you will learn and gain the confidence to be able to step out, put contracts together, talk to hard money lenders, understand construction costs, understand project management, and also the lingo of lenders and contractors, and be able to run the numbers to say, this is a great deal, this is not a great deal. How do I go about implementing all this in a simplistic way? And then also looking at it from a perspective of, how do I utilize this to expedite my path to financial freedom? So Flip School is really that and a bucket. And then also we have coaching every week. So that's another big hurdle that I see with people is they're like, this is so intimidating. What if I have questions? So you get the community through our Facebook group, and then we have coaching weekly as well. And the students love that.
I love it. Well, Tracy, I want to say thank you for taking the time to come on the show. I appreciate you sharing. For our viewers out there today, we gave tips on how to choose the right contractor for your real estate project. And then we also went a little bit as to how much things cost and how much does it cost to remodel a house. So, Tracy, from the bottom of our hearts, we want to say thank you to our viewers. If you've enjoyed this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you feel that this interview would be helpful to somebody, make sure to hit that share button. Until next time, and Tracy, again, thank you so much.